Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part of the 11th of November. It is Remembrance Day in the UK, at least, where we remember the fallen. We had Remembrance Sunday, but the 11th is the kind of proper day, if you like. Okay, so we bear that in mind today, of course. Please like, subscribe, and share if you haven't subscribed to the channel. That would be hugely appreciated. Right, let's get on with looking over the hits and losses and the goings on in the war in Ukraine over the last 24 hours. So we go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find them linked in the description below. 1,020 personnel lost, which is above the 1,000 threshold. But we have 79 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is below 100. I think the weather is definitely affecting things on the front line. There's a lot of fog going around, which is affecting the ability to fly drones in places like Pokrovsk, actually. One single armored combat vehicle, no tanks, 17 artillery systems. So that is below the daily average, but yeah, not as low as we have seen it on some days. I think this is very much affected by the weather because you'll be flying drones sort of further afield, deeper into enemy territory to hunt out those artillery systems. And if the weather is inclement, that can be somewhat challenging. One single multiple launch rocket system. Okay, we are going to go on to some personnel concerns to begin with, as we always do. We're going to start with this. It is an anecdote, but it's not uncommon. The commander of one of the units of the 218th Tank Regiment, military unit 82588 of the Russian Armed Forces, openly explained why there are so many missing soldiers in the Russian army. So we're going to go through what his claims are here. If you don't listen to commands, he says, if you will abandon your tasks, I swear to you on your mother's life, I swear on my children's lives, I will personally shoot you. I'll report everyone missing, and then I'll shoot everyone. I don't give an F who's above you, all of you, your whole group, you effing bastards, he says. Except for that man over there. Here you are, all you bastards. I'm telling you, prove that you're men. If you don't listen to commands, I will shoot all of you and report you missing, is effectively what he is saying. Well, that's what he said. And that shows us that it is a commonplace practice. Well, it doesn't show us it's commonplace, but one assumes it's commonplace that they report people as missing when they're known to be dead. In this case, executed by the commander of the unit. Pretty incredible. Russia has announced, according to Anton Gerashenko, that it will not extradite foreigners who have signed contracts with the Russian army at the request of other countries for criminal prosecution and sentencing, according to Russian media. So that is to say that if, for example, India asks for the soldiers back who were all their citizens who are fighting as soldiers in the Russian army to be sent back because they've been, improperly cajoled into fighting, then Russia will refuse to do so, refuse to send them back. The amendment approved by the Government Commission on Legislative Activity will apply to foreigners and stateless persons who are serving or have served in the Russian army and other military units under contract, as well as those who have participated in combat operations as part of these formations. The authorities are also considering a draft law that provides that no decision on deportation, readmission, or expulsion, when provided by law, will be made in relation to such persons. Russian lawyers say the aim of the amendments is to keep foreign military personnel in Russia. Of course, that is the case, and they are doing everything they can to press gang, I think, foreign fighters into service or foreign citizens into fighting service, and then deny them the ability to get back to their home countries. Euromaidan Press reports that more than 600 soldiers of the Russian Central Military District have died from drugs, suicide, and alcohol. Negligence, unsanitary conditions, and violence in the army are part of the same culture of devaluing life that leads to war crimes against civilians. So the article is, what else is killing Russian soldiers except for Ukrainian troops? Drugs, suicide, and military food. Wow. So that is a pretty damning indictment of the conditions in which the Russian army is fighting, leading to many dying not from you know, frontline activity, combat activity. Now, on the other hand, we also hear that Gangrene is making a comeback. Once a hallmark of the World War I trench warfare life, it is re-emerging in Ukraine. Medics report rising cases due to delayed evacuation caused by Russian drone strikes. Wounded soldiers often wait days underground before reaching a hospital, making deadly infections more likely and harder to treat. You're going to get a lot of unnecessary amputations, I would have thought, would otherwise be unnecessary, that become necessary. Putin is preparing a decisive operation in the Donetsk region, according to General Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief. Quote, the Russian command has sent about 150,000 occupiers to the Pokrovsk region. Russia's goal is to surround Pokrovsk and neighboring cities from the north, south, and east, block supply routes, and expel civilians. I was wondering whether, if it's true that the Russians are absolutely mounting forces up around Pokrovsk and Myrnihad, whether this could be the mother of all battles. However, they're also claiming they have cleared the whole eastern area of Kupiansk. Of course, they set themselves a 5-day goal of taking Kupiansk. That doesn't look like it's happened. I think there's every chance that the Russians are not telling the truth about Kupiansk. However, they do also claim to have taken some villages further to the south from this Pokrovsk area on the way to getting north of Hulayplay, surrounding Hulayplay from not only the south where they already are, but then from the east and the north. So I think it's very desperate down there on the southern Donetsk front. Around Pokrovsk, you could see the mother of all battles as Russia seeks to close the neck of this cauldron and win the battle for Pokrovsk. Ukraine not wanting Russia to have that PR and symbolic victory. I think the utility of the city itself has long been lost. I mean, goodness me, if that happens, then it could be a case of both sides piling in all sorts of resources into Pokrovsk. I don't know if that's the case, but that could be one outcome there. Now, talking about Pokrovsk, we've got the Ukrainian 155th Mechanized Brigade. These are the guys, slightly controversial. They were trained in France. They had some issues with then some desertions, actually, when they were in France. And then when they were brought back to Ukraine, having been fully trained up on French kit, totally kitted out. It turns out they weren't kitted out with drones. And they were just kind of taken piecemeal. And, that part of the 155th, these infantry fighting vehicles are going to be used over here. Those tanks are going to be used over there. Infantry are going to be used over there. And then there were loads of complaints, and then they were kind of brought back together and were thrown into Pokrovsk, actually, but have since, I think, shown themselves to be pretty decent. And here's a montage video of them hitting all sorts of things as UGV with all sorts of mines on board. Appears to have been hit by a drone here, and that montage shows them doing all sorts around Pokrovsk. So it's all about Pokrovsk at the moment. Visioner here says situation Pokrovsk front. Well, it's not all about Pokrovsk, actually. It's Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, and south of Pokrovsk going towards Hulayplay. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians managed to fortify along the forest massifs located west of the city, south of the railway, where active fighting is ongoing. Ukrainian counterattack, a Ukrainian unit supported by tanks, launched counterattacks in the southeastern part of the city of Rudinsky. The grey zone on the map has shrunk, meaning the enemy has managed to retreat. Russia, now we offer a description of the battle assessment in Pokrovsk from the perspective of the Russian soldier, whose letter is published by Kremlin's main propaganda channels. Tens of thousands of Russian soldiers are deployed under Pokrovsk. This can be confirmed when leaving Seledovo on the north to the northwest, where there is a lot of transport. The nature of the battle has changed. If you look at Pokrovsk through a drone camera, you probably won't see soldiers. Fighting is ongoing for the city, but it is not engulfed in flames, and machine gun bursts are very rarely heard there. Both sides control the main forces about 10 kilometers from the city. There's a drone barrier, and drones control all access roads, and only the most desperate brave men can cross the barrier alive. Fighting inside the city, it turns out that only the shadows of two armies are fighting inside Pokrovsk. Standing in the suburbs, Zelensky clearly does not appreciate the number of Russian forces in this direction. So remember, this is coming from Russian here. But you will no longer see an assault with the spirit of Bakhmut. An assault on one street may be carried out by 3 people, and most interestingly, they'll be fighting against 3 similar enemy soldiers. So there's an account of what might be going on in Pokrovsk, but there are also claims that there are huge numbers of resources around Pokrovsk. Uh, uh, there's a lot riding on it potentially. Um, what else do we have? Ukrainian special forces, special operations forces, are actively engaging Russian troops in central Kupiansk. So this is where the Russians claim that they have taken the east of Kupiansk and cleared out the Ukrainians from there. Ukrainians saying, well, actually, we've got special forces operating in there. If you do have special forces, it might be a sign of desperation, some might say, or it might not. Fighting continues against infiltrated Russian groups inside the city. They could be better equipped for doing these kind of clearing out operations. The Russians were looking like they could become encircled more recently, but it's going to be interesting to see how that is playing out in Kupiansk. Various claims coming from both sides there. And then complications of the situation in the Zaporizhzhia region. Deep State says in the latest update, you can see significant increase in the grey zone in Zaporizhzhia along the Solodka, Novomakhlivka, Rivnopilia, Novospinivska section. Actually, I think there's a couple of those have fallen to the Russians, Solodka and Novomakhlivka, I think, as well. Two of them. The enemy's numerical superiority, says Max 25, is showing, and part of the territory is under question of who controls it, which may threaten Gallipoli because the occupation of Rivnopil opens up operational space from the north to the city itself and complicates the holding of positions in Zeleny High and Vysoky. So part of the problem could be that the trench lines kind of went east-west and Russia is just moving along them now. They've come above the trench lines and are moving along rather than coming up from the south and meeting those trench lines. All this time, Gallipoli has been an impregnable city for the enemy, who at one time made a lot of efforts trying to climb into the city, in particular from the direction of Marfapil. Now a new path is opening up, which may complicate the defense of an important settlement in this area. That is a real challenge for the Ukrainians there. Right, let's actually finally get onto a loss list. And these have been flipping back and forth between huge losses for the Russians, very low for the Ukrainians, and then huge losses for the Ukrainians, very low for the Russians. And I think it depends who's attacking in any given place at any time. And also the nature of doing this open source intelligence work is you get these videos that just hit you and suddenly you got loads of equipment. And it couldn't, like, for example, I've just shown you two montage videos, and if they drop, then someone like Oryx here then has to look at them and say, right, that's a whole bunch of equipment, and it's just because one unit or two units on a particular day have dropped their published videos. But it doesn't mean that that's happened the day before. So what you need to do is look at these figures over a period of time, say a month, and then try and get a sense of what's going on. And it all smooths itself out and you get a much better sense. So today we swung from really high Russian losses in the last update to really high Ukrainian losses here. I would suggest it means the Ukrainians have been attacking more, but also the Russians might have just dropped some videos that actually take place over a couple of weeks. Anyway, that being said, we've got three tanks, sort of Russian era, Soviet era tanks, T-64, T-72s, but also two Leopard 1A5s destroyed. That's interesting because these are the more lightly armored, not the newer kind of Leopard 2s. The Leopard 1A5s have got quite a few of these and more still coming, I believe. It shows that they are using them in on the front rather than just as a kind of an extra form of artillery. We've got some BMP2s, and the rest of these are generally mobility vehicles, so BTRs, but then onto a Rochelle Senator, a medevac version, a Banvan BVS-10, which is the articulated tracked vehicle, the PBV 302. That's the Swedish infantry fighting vehicle, or APC, I can't remember. But anyway, the one that went obsolete in 2014, they got a load of them from Sweden. You got French VAB, BTR, YPR 765 from the Netherlands, M113s, Novators, Humvees, and then you're down to artillery, including self-propelled AS-90 from the UK and two S-22 Bogdana 4s from Ukraine. So a range of stuff, mainly sort of mobility, but there's a few tanks on there, a couple of Leopard 1s and some infantry and some self-propelled guns too. So quite a lot lost there. 38 pieces of kit, and the comparison is to 9 pieces of kit for the Russians. Although we do have slightly more expensive kit here in the form of a single launcher for the S-400. That's going to be very, very valuable compared to an MTLB, for example. So that may kind of even things up a little bit, but ostensibly, Ukrainians losing a lot more volume of equipment. Okay, weather has been a major hamper. So I'm going to show you some in a second. This video, which I think is absolutely extraordinary. Well, in fact, I'll show you this first, right? And then we'll go back to the analysts. So this is a video that's doing the rounds because it really shows you what's going on around Pokrovsk. It shows you a couple of things. One, they advance when there's fog, and Russians making some advances in the Pokrovsk area may come as a result of weather. Pierre was telling me he's having a chat with someone in Ukraine who was saying that they think Russia's taken advantage of the weather just recently because drones can't hit convoys like this. But also, actually, it means Ukraine can then do their own medevacs and rotations. So the fact that they have done a rotation around Myrnarad, the Ukrainians, might be because of the weather. So both sides are taking advantage and getting vehicles and equipment and resources into the urban areas of Pokrovsk. But this is quite incredible. On the one hand, you can ridicule this because they are coming in on motorbikes, they're coming in bukankas, they're coming in on cars with the doors not on, SUVs of types of sorts, maybe a military jeep there, but essentially that's a real motley crew, and a complete, well, they aren't coming in on BMPs, BTRs, and MTLBs. That much is true. On the one hand, you can look at and it's foggy, so it shows you that one, they're using unarmored vehicles, and two, it is the weather is advantageous for the movement of material. And these guys are going supposedly into Pokrovsk. Don't just dismiss this as like Russians being in trouble because they're not using that kind of equipment. Although you can make that claim, and also, I think if they did have MTLBs, would they be using them to go into Pokrovsk? Probably, but I don't think there's much of a disadvantage in using this kind of equipment because they're doing it in the fog, and also motorbikes are useful. You have to individually take motorbikes out rather than take out a single vehicle. We saw a golf buggy get taken out the other day, and it had something like, I'm guessing, but like 9 people in it. That drone flying into a packed back of that buggy could have killed straight off the bat like 4 or 5 people and injured others, or just injured all of them or whatever. Whereas, to that single drone on a motorbike takes out a motorbike and a single person. So motorbikes do have an advantage, and seeing them here is a worry for the Ukrainians. It's worth noting that there is this video that could well be coming from a similar sort of place, where we have a load of motorcycles getting taken out, apparently in Pokrovsk. So Ukrainian forces are publishing footage of their devastating strikes on Russian equipment. As soon as they enter Pokrovsk, they were destroyed. Neither the fog nor the mobility of their vehicles helped the Russian occupiers. So I guess that though you won't be able to see from high above with drones spotting for Russian kit, you can still fly your drones at lower down levels looking for stuff. So drones can still be useful, of course. And here there's a montage of all sorts of motorcycles getting hit. Anyway, the analyst says weather hampers Pokrovsk operations. Ukraine is heavily dependent on drones, and right now the weather is typically autumnal. Heavy fog makes it difficult to operate and advantages the Russians, who use the opportunity to get more troops into the combat zone. Ukraine is struggling to keep the shoulders of the salient open, and both sides have advanced and have been pushed back in different sectors. Russia has instituted involuntary reserve forces being called up on a monthly basis as general recruitment seizes up due to financial constraints in paying bonuses at state and republic levels. So they've cut bonuses right across Russia for recruitment, but they are calling up on reserves. They've changed the law, and we know that they're getting loads of foreigners and not allowing them. They changed the law so they can't be extradited back. All of this means that while Russia does have massive challenges with recruitment, they also do have some solutions as well. And the weather is meaning that they're piling in resources and people to Pokrovsk, and the Ukrainians likely taking some advantage themselves of the weather, but are unable to hit these advances as well as they would like, but they are still hitting them nonetheless. And as you can see, it's still foggy. It's still a somewhat dull and foggy environment, and they are taking out Russian motorcycles there. Now, we also see this. I showed you this in the live stream yesterday. Ukrainian soldiers found a Russian drone, a Zhdun drone, and they come up from behind it. It is a fiber optic drone, and it's obviously laying an ambush with the camera pointing forward, waiting for a Russian vehicle to come along, and then it'll take off and blow it up. And here they come up behind it and snip the cord, the fiber optic, and then take it apart and take it back to look at, see what they can find from this this different type of drone, dismantling the warhead for further study, as it says here, and the video goes on to show them sort of taking it apart and then taking it back. What else do we have? Ukrainian troops shot down a Russian Scat 350M drone. It's a $400,000 piece of surveillance equipment. The Scat 350M has an endurance of up to 240 kilometers. It's being used to help guide Russia's S-400 launches and Lancet loitering munitions. So the Ukrainians here help in this montage video are seen. Of course, that was going to happen. I should have thought about that. Here they are seen taking out the Scat as it flies, looking like it flies in night sky, taken out with a thermal imaging drone there, as far as I can work out. Right, so that is good news for Ukrainians in that section. Right, we're moving on to the new, onto the next section of distant strikes. So drone and missile strikes overnight. Russia launched 119 drones, mostly Shaheds, targeting frontline regions and Odessa. Ukrainian air defense downed or jammed 53, but 59 of them stuck 18 locations. So that is a really poor interception rate. But it does say targeting frontline regions, and that's what happens if they target the front line. Many of them get through because it's too close. You don't have the time to acquire the target and then intercept it. Odessa as well was hard hit. Now, Army Aviation have brought out a video of hunting of Russian Shaheds and Orlan drones here. Quite a cool video of these drones being taken out, by the looks of it, by some kind of heavy machine gun or similar from, I would presume, a helicopter there, taking out all of those aerial threats. Interesting. Shahed, I presume, getting hit on a wing or something, and then it banks heavily. Here we have a helicopter being viewed from a drone, I presume, maybe another helicopter, shooting at a Shahed drone fairly close to it as well. And then, yeah, taking down that Shahed. Do you think that crater on the ground is another Shahed these guys shot down? Could be. So if you look, there's another crater back there, so it could be a second Shahed that is taken out here. And what else do we have? I've wondered about this. This is really cool. This is something I've actually thought about with young people, or not necessarily young people, any people. I mean, here we've got fairly young women fighting at night, defending the skies in mobile defense teams, but actually she's a master's student at university. And I think this is really clever, which is you still need the society to function, you still need the economy to function. So it's great if you can get people to work in the daytime. You know, tax dollars are then put in the coffers. You've got liquidity in the economy. People are working, but actually at night you're not taking people from private jobs and then putting them into the army. So essentially what happens is you lose the tax dollars. Arguably, it depends if their job can be replaced, but you're arguably losing their tax dollars and then spending government money on employing these guys, and that kind of equation really hurts. So the best case scenario is these guys still continue working, or in this case being a student, but you get the point, continue doing their thing, and they are then providing for, they're helping the economy, society, and whatnot. And then at night time, when you have most of the attacks, they are working in a mobile defense team shooting down Russian drones. In this case, she's using, I think, an old Maxim on the back of an SUV or something like that to shoot down drones. So I think that's really cool way of doing things. And a final bit on kind of drones and what the Ukrainians can do. We saw a drone warehouse or two get taken out, a depot get taken out around Avdiivka at the airport there the other day. Maybe 1,000 drones, maybe 1,500 warheads. Here we've got high-resolution satellite images of a launch site in Symbulova, Oriel region, according to Ukrainian intelligence on Telegram. I do wonder about why they release this information. Surely you keep it quiet, don't let the Russians know that you know that they're there, and then hit them. But anyway, it's out there on the socials. In total, there are at least 93 garages and 15 hangars for storing drones here. In some of them, drones have been spotted. In one day, there can be up to 500 drones at the same time. There are 8 static launchers at the site, next to which there are 20 garages in total. This is the largest launch site with a total area of more than 5 square kilometers and a launch road length of more than 2.5 kilometers. So these might well be launched. Well, clearly there are static launchers, but also launched maybe on the back of SUVs that drive along, and then they take off from there. They get them up to a high enough speed, and then they can sort of fly off the back or off the top. That needs to be hit. Obvs, that should be target number 2 after Yellow Booga. So anyway, interesting that they released imagery of this kind of stuff into the public spaces. Russia then hit Odessa region, launched a massive overnight drone attack on Odessa, damaging energy and transport infrastructure. One person was injured there. I was wondering, so we're going to talk about Tuapse in a second. I was wondering whether Russia just want to completely destroy Odessa, like the entire port infrastructure. They would want to take it out. I'll talk about that in a second. So, yeah, Odessa and then near the front lines. Now, that's all we have as far as imagery is concerned, but considering well over 50 drones have hit their targets or near enough, one can assume that it was probably a fairly challenging night for the Ukrainians. We just don't have the information at the moment. Now, the Ukrainians, if we're looking at the change of their strike behavior, in addition to the increase in the number of attacks, so they've been sending more drones and missiles, they've been attacking more. So there's been an increase in the number of attacks, but there's also been an increase in the average flight range for these attacks. In October, a new record was set. So last month, 663 kilometers from the Ukrainian border was the average strike range, and it was previously 501 kilometers for the whole of 2025. So that 1 month alone, they've pushed the average range back 160 kilometers. That's going to be giving the Russians something to think about. There's a whole load of new targets suddenly in range if you add 150 kilometers to your range. That's quite incredible. The top regions by recorded strikes in October: Nizhny Novgorod was hit 4 times, 4 targets; Bryansk 4 targets; Volgograd 4 targets; Belgorod 3 targets, and Orenburg 2 targets. In fact, Orenburg is being struck as we speak. Okay, so Ukraine's general staff overnight confirmed strikes on Saratov in Russia, an oil refinery there. Large-scale fires broken out after a series of explosions. Then Feodosia in Crimea, the marine oil terminal and fuel tanks were hit there, apparently. And then in Donetsk region in occupied Ukraine, MTZ tractor warehouse in Donetsk and a Russian soldiers near Otratina were also hit, according to the general staff. There were several Russian airports closed. In fact, Penza and Saratov were closed. They've now reopened. And then Saratov, Orenburg has been closed, I think, now. So, yes. Here's the attack on Saratov oil refinery. It was ongoing last night, and there were various videos that came out to show strikes on Saratov. Just wait to see what what happens with this. Oh, yeah, big, bright explosion over there, and then cloud coming up. So anyway, there you go. Here's a slightly brighter interpretation of what happened at Saratov. So some big old fires going on there. A fire at the drone after a drone attack on Saratov oil refinery. Local governor even confirmed that drones and not debris have damaged the infrastructure object. The oil refinery has been attacked several times before, most recently just a week ago. That is good news for Ukraine. Here, Ukrainian drones, here's a still image, struck Saratov oil refinery overnight, says now reports, one of Russia's largest and part of the Rosneft entity. It's the second hit this month there. A fire broke out at the site. The Volgograd airport was temporarily shut down due to the attack. And then we're going to go on to Tuapse. This is 2 nights ago, but we've got new imagery that's absolutely incredible. Just a massive explosion on some part of the infrastructure, but it does just look like a general kind of rock or I don't know, cement jetty or something going out there. It doesn't mean that there aren't fuel pipelines going out there to load ships and whatnot. I think it's this, or unless it's just past there. Anyway, it's a fairly sizable explosion. Tatargami says a truly infernal video has surfaced from tonight's attack, which is actually so 2 nights ago's attack. By Ukrainian forces on the Tuapse seaport. The massive explosion points to a serious payload carried by an unmanned surface vehicle. So it's obviously driven into the port and then exploded. Extra credit goes to the cameraman who happened to be at the right place at the right time there. Now, here somebody says Ukraine is probably trying to permanently shut down the export facility in Tuapse. If tankers can't load or are automatically attacked when loading, it'll shut the entire oil export through the Black Sea. So, which is why I said I think then Odessa, if that happens and Tuapse is taken out and is unable to be used as a port, Russia will get their revenge on Odessa for sure. So here we have that same footage being shown, and Noel report says this is the explosion of one of the naval drones during the night attack on Tuapse port. The strike marked another precise hit on Russia's Black Sea logistics, although we don't quite know, what damage was done. The analyst adds massive attack on Tuapse by the Ukrainians. Russia's already beleaguered Black Sea oil export terminal was hit hard again last night by naval drones exploding on the export loading piers. The port is in such a state now that it's unlikely to be repaired inside a year. No tankers have been loaded there for almost 2 weeks. So when there was that other USV strike there, and there are no tankers, says the analyst. With Ust-Luga, that's one up near St. Petersburg, still at around half capacity, Russian exports are in free fall. Last month, revenue from exports fell 27% year on year. So they've lost almost a third of their exports in the last month. And continued strikes on Tuapse are not going to help the Russians at all. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. Now we get these FP2 guided drone strikes. These are, if I remember correctly, I get them often muddled up, but I think the FP2 are the 200-kilometer, 105-kilogram warhead medium range drones, if you like, near ear drones. Look at this whole oil facility in Crimea that is ripe for the picking. It's interesting that it doesn't go for the any of these tanks. I don't know if these things are quite difficult to navigate. I talked about this the other day, when I've seen some of these drones that look like these drones. You're never sure whether they're, I don't know, something like the Beaver drone or whether the FP2s. But I imagine in their final phase, they're quite difficult to control. There might be a lag. I don't know. But it goes for this building instead of any of those big tanks. And I don't know if that's on purpose. There seems only to be one as well here. So a single strike where you would actually like, 50 drones to be smashing into that, and that to be no more. Alas, it wasn't to be. And we hear this morning that there are drones in Orenburg. These look like Luti drones, but they're not. I think they're without the landing gear, which means that's an FP1 drone. So this is an FP2 by all accounts. 105-kilogram warhead, can go 200 kilometers. For the longer range ones, the payload's going to be less. So these are going to be less explosive, but they are going to have a much greater range, and they can get a good sort of 1,600 kilometers or so, I believe. I guess we'll keep an eye on whether, in fact, let's see now if there's anything else that's come out. Oh, that's a horrific video. I've seen that. It's horrible at the end. Ugh. Swarm of drones drives Russian soldiers out of a temporary shelter. The first two drones pierce the walls of the container, and the third one explodes right next to the Russian occupiers. Caution: the video contains a lot of screaming from the Russians, and the very end is it's pretty sickening. Anyway, yes, I don't know if there is more breaking news. A kid in Orenburg region has filmed smoke rising in the city of Orsk, quite possibly the very large oil refinery here, while there is an oil depot nearby as well. This is very close to the Kazakhstan border. So that would be the drone that you just see fly overhead there. Breaking news: Russia attacked NATO again overnight. Romania confirms one of Moscow's drones hit its territory. I did hear about this, yeah, near the river Danube, where Putin's hordes were terrorizing residents of Reni. So quite often, because the Danube River is the border of Romania and Ukraine, and there are these big important ports of Ismail and Reni that sit on the Danube, they are often targeted by drones. But if the drones overshoot and just go to the other side of the river, they're falling in Romania. And there was a case of another drone falling in on Romanian territory last night. But yeah, Orsk attack there at possibly the Orsk Nefteolgents's refinery, one of the largest processing plants in the region. That is ongoing. So yeah, fingers crossed the Ukrainians can impact these sites with their own version of sanctions. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. Russia's FSB, so their secret service, claims it thwarted a Ukrainian intelligence operation, allegedly backed, of course, by the British handlers. They love to hate us, to hijack a MiG-31 with a Kinzhal missile and provoke NATO by flying it towards Romania's Constanța air base. Supposedly, $3 million was offered via personal bank transfer. It's a bit of a weird, I mean, another cartoonish FSB story, says no reports. It is a weird story because you wouldn't fly towards NATO. Like, if you've been bribed to fly towards NATO, right? You're either going to be shot down by NATO, or you're going to provoke them in a way that your bosses haven't told you to do, and then you're going to fly back to Russia, and then you're going to be sent to a gulag. Well done, you've earned 3 million spondoolies. Let's have that back, and we'll send you to a gulag. Or you're shot down. Like, what a bizarre story. So none of that makes sense, but Russian disinformation. Okay, Belgium, as I've already let you know, there's a bit more detail on this. Belgium has enlisted foreign troops to combat drones, according to Reuters. French and German anti-drone teams have arrived in Belgium, as well as 20 specialists from the Royal Air Force of Great Britain, who will be equipped with systems capable of jamming electronic signals needed for the operation of drones. So neighbors are helping out Belgium there. Now, I've already done a breaking news video on this. Trump has said that the US is no longer spending money on Ukraine, but earning from it, saying NATO allies are now footing the bill for weapons sent to Kiev. And he says here, I don't really want to, but we're making money off the war. I mean, it's quite incredible. Let's listen to the man.
We're not spending any money on the war. The war is being funded by NATO. NATO is buying our equipment. In fact, I don't want to make money on that war. I don't want to, but we are actually making money on that war because they're buying our equipment, as you know. But
like I said in the video previously, he says, I don't want to make money off this war, but obviously selling equipment to NATO and not to, or other NATO nations, and not to Russia is a strategic and moral decision to facilitate Ukraine doing well in the war, right? So in other words, Trump admits that the US wants Ukraine to do well in the war because they're not selling stuff to Russia, but they are selling stuff to NATO. And then he complains that I don't want to be making money off the war. So if you want the outcome to come about to the point that you're selling stuff so that it comes about, and you don't want to be making money, then you can just give a load of stuff away as well, because you've already admitted the objective implicitly. So this doesn't make sense. Like, he's talking bollocks in one way here or another here. Like, and the lie there is he doesn't want to make money. He does want to make money. If he didn't want to make money, he would be giving that equipment to Ukraine because that fits in with the strategy and the desired outcome. He wants to make money. It's as simple as that. And indeed, like, this is a great comment here on that video from this morning from Tim Blumenbert, who says Trump's focus is mainly on the money and filling his pockets. This is why he's flip-flopping between Zelensky and Putin, looking at which one can enrich him faster. I think that's a pretty pithy, concise synopsis of what's going on there. Right, so Trump says the US will lower tariffs for India after Delhi significantly cut Russian oil imports. I suppose this is how it works, which is we're threatening you with tariffs. We put tariffs on unless you cut down on your oil purchases from Russia. You've cut down, okay, we'll lower the tariffs. So, quote, tariffs were high because of Russian oil, and they stopped, reduced it a lot. So, yes, we're going to lower tariffs, he stated, linking trade benefits to reduced Kremlin revenue. So that, if it's true, someone says great if true. Always love when Trump gets something right internationally from time to time. Stop clock is right twice a day. If that's true, then happy days. Now, also alongside this, and going to the analysts again, Saudi Arabia and OPEC have increased oil output. Russia is furious. Russians are reeling from another Saudi decision to reduce prices and increase production to at least until the end of the first quarter of 2026, with oil prices already collapsing at $63 per barrel. Russia can only sell its crude around $53 a barrel. He's put pounds there, but I think that's dollars. But its costs for extraction and sea exports are around $45 a barrel, leaving it with just $8 in margins. Bearing in mind the 2026 budget was based on $70 per barrel, we already know that it is going to be in a huge deficit. Saudi Arabia seems to have come to some arrangement like that of the 1980s, where it increases production to drive out Russian oil from the market and use its low extraction costs, the world's cheapest at under $9 per barrel, to continue to make money. I think the Americans are behind this, as they were then. It increases their export of LNG, liquefied natural gas, and oil, and makes it worth keeping high cost extraction fields open when they would otherwise need to shut down, even though they're only just above break even. The Saudis also resented Russia lying over its sales and extraction quotas in 2022, 23, 24, when they lost market share because of it. Sanctions have largely driven Russian crude out of the market in a matter of weeks, with big buyers like India and China slashing imports to avoid secondary sanctions. Quite what Russia is going to do with some 200 tankers full of unsold crude sitting around the world is hard to fathom. The knock-on effect of not being able to export with little storage space means fields in Russia in winter will need to close, pipelines will freeze if the oil doesn't move, and damage is rapid. Add that to the oil refinery damage and the crisis is coming home. Russia has no way out of this. That's a really positive view of what's going on there, which I think is worth taking into account. I also want to just highlight this. Sorry, it's another article that I shared with Pierre last night. The cost of war. Is Russia running out of money to continue the fight? So the Kyiv Independent has an analysis that basically is not looking good for Russia. The cost of war is Russia running out of money to continue the fight. In this report, the Free Russia Foundation think tank shared with the Kyiv Independent Russian opposition politician Vladimir Milov said Russia's budgetary situation is anything but normal. To keep Russia's military machine running like this, a lot more money is needed, and there simply is not any. Milov, who was an economic advisor for the Russian government in the early 2000s, told the Kyiv Independent. The Kyiv Independent looked into the Russian budget draft to see if Russia is ultimately running out of money to feed its war machine. So this is quite a long article. According to the report, Russia has experienced a full-blown budget crisis. Vladimir Dubrovsky, a senior economist at the Center for Social and Economic Research, Ukraine, said the deficit is, quote, Russia's most serious economic and political economic problem. The country is facing 7 consecutive years of high budget deficit over 2%, a streak unseen since 1999, according to Milov's report. The Russian government has officially abandoned its goal of keeping the deficit below 1% of GDP. For 2025, the projected deficit was increased by 0.5% to 2.6% total. The government expects the 2026 deficit to fall to 1.6% of GDP, but as I say, that projection is likely unrealistic. And of course, they lie about an awful lot of their stats. Anyway, it goes into loads of loads of information here, cutting bonuses, going down to 4-day working weeks, furloughing and this and that, being out of options, the military spending going up, but actually they're trying to bring down the cost of recruitment bonuses, how the West can then squeeze Russia out. So we'll just read the end here. According to Milov, Russia's deepening economic and budget crisis is a direct consequence of Western sanctions. He argued that Europe must accelerate phasing out Russian energy, yes, cutting imports of liquefied natural gas by 2027 and all other energy resources by 2028 to further disrupt Russia's war machine. Quote, this is extremely important, he said, adding that gas supplies to Slovakia and Hungary, as well as LNG exports to Western Europe, remain among Gazprom's main sources of revenue. Quote, these deliveries bring Gazprom well over half of its total profit, Milov said. Of course, the US has given Hungary a 1-year exemption. So Vasily Astrov, a senior economist at the Vienna Institute for the International Economic Studies, believes Russia's worsening fiscal performance this year stems primarily from 2 factors: lower global oil prices, which we just talked about, and that's going to get worse for Russia, and an overvalued ruble. The ruble's strength has reduced revenues from energy exports once converted into the national currency, he told the Kyiv Independent. Dubrovsky said that while the oil price cap, which sets a maximum allowable price for Russian seaborne oil exports, remains the most significant measure against Russia, it has not yet become fully effective. Secondary sanctions and restrictions targeting specific Russian entities have so far been largely symbolic, producing at best one-off effects, according to Dubrovsky. Until now, the global decline in oil prices has had the greatest impact, he said. Milov emphasized that Western sanctions, though not a single magical measure, but rather a complex system of restrictions, are working. High inflation and interest rates are, of course, a direct product of sanctions, Milov concluded. So that's really good news, all things considered. Okay. Now let's go back to look at the Russian newspapers. Steve, and this is really relevant to my political positioning, which is that Trump is useless for Ukraine. And those people who still hang on to this idea that Trump is the best president that the US can have for dealing with Ukraine you are just wrong. And the Russians are telling you this themselves. So Steve Rosenberg from the BBC looks at the Russian newspapers and says today, one Russian paper suggests the US midterm elections, so if the Democrats really win hard in the November midterms, quote, could undermine Donald Trump's power and hurt Russia. Donald Trump being in power is good for Russia. That is the generally accepted position here. Other papers focus on Russia's economic problems, quote, zero growth on the fourth quarter, gradual increase in crisis phenomena in manufacturing. So it's not looking good for Russia, but it's the interesting claim that actually Trump being in power is good for Russia. So oops, that's what I've already showed you. So, then it's interesting. I've talked a lot about this. Is really obsessing me at the moment. The attack on the BBC is really representative of much bigger things, and it's an attack from the US. It's an attack from the hard right in the US. There's influence coming into the UK in terms of funding for anti-abortion, pro-life stuff, funding for reform, and the BBC is seen as an enemy. It's now, just to let you know, I haven't got it here. It's now the second biggest, something like 77 million viewers the BBC News gets in the US or something like that. It's really significant. It's really it's got a great growth market there. And Trump is going to want to attack the BBC. So you're seeing this massive attack. Trump is now threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Of course, the issue... Not of course, but the issue might be that statute of limitations for libel in the UK is 1 year. So he's out of time for that. So I don't know what the court case is going to be. But anyway, first Trump attacks the BBC and now the Russians. Quote, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has criticized the BBC as, quote, beyond redemption, accusing it of falsifying Russia-related stories. She says the BBC fabricated its coverage of events in the Ukrainian town of Bucha. So now they've seen that there's this whole thing about supposedly fabricating, or they're splicing together two things that Trump said. He did say them, but they put it together as if he said it like next to each other in this one speech, to try and give this impression that he wanted those crowds to attack the Capitol type thing, which he did anyway. There was no need for BBC to do it. Really frustrating because all the evidence speaks for itself that it exists. Anyway, now the Russians are looking at that, saying, "Oh, we can do that. Oh, yeah, they fabricated the butcher massacres as well, and whatnot." So this is John Simpson, the legendary BBC journalists, talking about how Russia is now piling in. And actually, interesting here, we've got Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, saying that Nigel Farage is basically teaming up with Trump to criticize the BBC. It's shocking and unpatriotic. It shows he wants Trump's America with his attacks on free media coming to the UK. Election interference has come from Farage's friend Putin. So again, drawing like Russia into this as well. This is all part of the attack on the BBC is a win for Putin, is a win for Trump, is a win for reform. It's exactly what they want. So, there's so many elements of that BBC scandal that need to be investigated. Now, Zelensky so what happened yesterday? Ukraine's NABU and SAP, so these anti-corruption agencies, have exposed the corruption scheme inside Energoatom, so the Ukrainian nuclear energy entity. A known businessman and former energy officials skimmed 10 to 15% of contracts by extorting kickbacks from suppliers. Though unofficial, they controlled a company with over 200 billion hryvnia in revenue. Over 70 raids are underway. Now, one of the challenges here is one of the people involved with this was formerly a business partner, I think, before Zelensky was president, in something to do with Zelensky, the TV company or whatever. Zelensky, I don't think is implicated in any way here, but there's a guilt by association and stuff going on. So it's pretty controversial. This is Zelensky on today's NABU raids and Energoatom. Quote, any effective action against corruption is necessary. Accountability is necessary. Everyone who built these schemes must face a clear legal response. There must be verdicts. So he's going hard on it. But the guy that was associated with him skipped abroad just in the nick of time. So people are, thinking, oh, that's a bit dodgy. Following the NABU SAP raids, Energoatom Supervisory Board will hold a special session to assess the situation and determine next steps. This includes launching an independent audit of relevant operations and a full review of the company's internal controls and procedures. So that's going on. Then we hear that Ukraine has just won its largest banking fraud case in November. On November the 10th, a London court ordered Privatbank's owners, Kolomoisky and Boholyubov, to pay Ukraine $3 billion in damages. So that would be very useful, wouldn't it? That could go straight towards buying some stuff. However, enforcement of this is likely to be hard, and even more so considering that Boholyubov has escaped Ukraine and is now in Vienna. Nonetheless, good news there. Some people saying Austria is not a great place for hoping that money is going to be found at all. I love this. This is just a positive ending. During a power outage from the Russian attacks, an elderly lady with a flashlight selects seeds from a catalogue in order to order them via post and plant them in the spring. Quote, that's all you need to know about faith in the future, says the writing here. So the idea that, I'm going to be planting this spring, here under attack, there's a power cut, and yet by flashlight, she's ordering seeds from a catalog in order to plant them in the springtime. It's just lovely. There's something lovely about that. Anyway, I'm going to leave you again. These two things, hopefully positive, and hopefully this is true. Hopefully they haven't taken this image from before it was blown up. But Tim White says, look, I was totally shocked this evening when I saw this photo. Remember the gas station in Kharkiv region that was destroyed on Friday? And this is it on the top of the image. Somehow it was reopened yesterday evening. This is incredible. Now, if that is true, I mean, that is phenomenal. I imagine they do have teams that just are now used to going out and making sure that, like with the railways and any critical infrastructure, it is up and running as soon as possible. So if there's it looks horrific here, but that might be somewhat superficial damage. And if you can make sure the pumps are still working safely, and we get the sign up, then people can come back in. So I hope it's true that in 2 days this has been rebuilt to what you can see there, and that shows resilience. That's what you need. They need to be able to bounce back really quickly, get things working really, really quickly. The emergency workers, and by that I mean, energy workers who are fixing power lines and people fixing up gas stations, petrol stations and whatnot. These people are unsung heroes of Ukraine. that allow Ukraine to bounce back from these horrific strikes and whatnot as quickly as they do. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for your support. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.